Stop. If you step onto that mat, you're agreeing to terms you don't understand. The voice cut through the low murmur of the underground dojo, a place that smelled of sweat, rice straw, and unspoken rules. The room was packed shoulder to shoulder, men in dark suits and fighters in worn GIs forming a tight ring around the tatami. No banners, no cameras, no applause, only the quiet tension of people who knew they were about to witness something that wasn't meant to be remembered. Bruce Lee paused at the edge of the mat, his chest rising and falling with controlled breaths. Across from him stood a woman no one dared underestimate. She wasn't larger than him. She didn't look imposing. But the way the room leaned toward her, like iron filings toward a magnet, said everything. Undefeated, disciplined, untouchable. The whispers had traveled through Hong Kong, Osaka, and into the back alleys of Tokyo. No man had thrown her. No challenger had walked away unchanged. A hand caught Bruce's sleeve. "You're not famous yet," the man whispered. "You can still choose who you become." Bruce looked at the woman. She bowed, not as a courtesy, but as a boundary. He returned the bow. Before this story goes any further, take a second to subscribe, because stories like this deserve to be heard. The air between them felt heavier than the crowd, heavier than pride. This wasn't about proving strength. It was about something harder to define. Respect, identity, the cost of stepping forward, when walking away would be easier. The referee raised his hand. And in that suspended moment before motion, the real question wasn't who would win. It was who they would be when it was over. Tokyo in 1962 was a city rebuilding itself in steel and neon, but beneath its modern skin lived older codes, unwritten rules about honor, hierarchy, and belonging. Bruce Lee arrived not as a legend, but as a young man searching for refinement. He had come to study, to exchange techniques, to test himself in quiet gyms where reputations were built through sweat rather than spectacle. He rented a small room above a noodle shop, the scent of broth seeping to the floorboards each night. His days were filled with training and observation. He watched how Japanese practitioners moved, efficient, deliberate, grounded. Judo was not just throws. It was timing, balance, and humility to use an opponent's force rather than oppose it. The first time he heard about her was from a dock worker with cauliflower ears and a careful way of speaking. "You strike like lightning," the man told Bruce. "But lightning cannot uproot a tree if the roots are deep. She is such a tree." Bruce had smiled politely, but the words stayed with him. He wasn't chasing fights. He was chasing understanding. Still, in every dojo he visited, her name surfaced like a quiet warning. She trained at a private facility, invitation only. Her matches were unrecorded, her victories unquestioned. One evening, after sparring with a university club, a senior practitioner approached him. "You seek improvement," he said. "Then you must face what you do not control." Bruce wiped his face with a towel. "And what is that?" "Someone who does not fear you." The man slid a folded paper across the table. An address, a time, no signature. Bruce stared at it long after the man left. He thought about his teachers, about the philosophy that martial arts was not about domination, but self-knowledge. He thought about how easily ego disguises itself as ambition. Outside, Tokyo hummed with possibility. Inside, a decision began to take shape. The dojo was hidden beneath a textile warehouse near the Sumida River. No sign marked the entrance. A single lantern hung beside a narrow stairwell, its light flickering against concrete walls worn smooth by decades of footsteps. Bruce descended slowly, each step echoing in confined space. The air grew cooler, tinged with the faint scent of tatami mats and liniment oil. At the bottom, a wooden door stood slightly ajar. Voices murmured inside, low, restrained, expectant. When he entered, conversation stopped. Not hostile, not welcoming, simply observant. A man in a dark hakama approached and bowed. "You were invited?" "Yes." "You understand this is not a public contest." "I understand." The man studied him, as if weighing more than his words. "We value control here. Strength without control is noise." Bruce nodded. "Then I hope to be quiet." A few heads turned at that. He removed his shoes and stepped onto the edge of the mat. Fighters were paired off in slow, deliberate drills. No one rushed. No one wasted motion. It was like watching a language spoken fluently, one he understood, but not yet with their accent. Then he saw her. She stood near the far wall, tying her belt with precise, economical movements. Her hair was pulled back, her expression neutral. When she looked up, their eyes met briefly, not a challenge, not curiosity, recognition, as if she had already accepted that this moment would come. The instructor approached her and spoke quietly. She listened, then nodded once. Bruce felt something unexpected, not nerves, but clarity, the kind that comes when distractions fall away and only purpose remains. The instructor returned. "She will meet you," he said, "not to prove anything, to learn what you bring." Bruce bowed. "That is all I ask." Around them, the room subtly shifted. Pairs stopped training. Conversations faded. The mat was cleared without announcement. This was not spectacle. This was examination. They stood opposite each other in silence as the last observers formed a respectful perimeter. The referee, an older man with silver at his temples, raised his hand but did not speak. The absence of formal announcements made the moment feel more intimate, more consequential. She bowed first. Bruce returned it, slower, deliberate. In that exchange lived centuries of tradition compressed into a single gesture. Respect offered, respect returned. They circled. Bruce noted her stance, low, centered, weight distributed with almost imperceptible adjustments. She wasn't waiting for him to attack. She was listening with her body, reading the subtle shifts in his shoulders, hips, breath. He fainted forward. She did not react. He stepped to the side. Her foot mirrored the movement, maintaining distance without retreating. The room was silent, except for the faint rustle of fabric and the soft friction of bare feet on tatami. Bruce moved first, quick, probing, testing her balance with a light grip at her sleeve. In an instant, her hand closed over his wrist, redirecting his force downward. Not a throw, a reminder. He smiled, almost involuntarily. She released him just as quickly. This was not hostility. It was dialogue. They engaged again. Bruce attempted to off-balance her with a sudden pull, transitioning into a sweep. She shifted her weight a fraction of a second before contact, her foot anchoring like a root. His sweep met emptiness. A murmur rippled through the observers. Not surprise, but acknowledgement. Minutes passed in measured exchanges. Neither pressed recklessly. Neither retreated into passivity. It was a conversation of pressure and release, intention and response. Bruce realized something unsettling and exhilarating at once. She was not trying to feed him. She was trying to understand him. And that meant he had to decide what he would show. Sweat began to bead along Bruce's temples, not from exhaustion, but from the intensity of sustained focus. Every movement demanded honesty. Any attempt at deception beyond the physical, any trace of ego, was met with immediate correction. He tried a faster entry, combining footwork he had refined in Hong Kong with sudden change in rhythm. For a fraction of a second, he felt her balance shift. Opportunity. He committed. Her hip turned. His momentum lifted. The world rotated in a blur to tatami and ceiling beams. He landed flat on his back. The impact was controlled, almost gentle, but unmistakable. A collective exhale moved through the room. Bruce lay there for a moment, staring at the wooden rafters. No pain, no humiliation, only clarity. She stepped back, giving him space to rise. He sat up, then stood, brushing his hands against his GI. Their eyes met again. This time, he saw something new. Not superiority, not triumph. Respect earned in the willingness to stand again. He bowed. She returned it. They resumed. The second exchange was sharper. Bruce adjusted his timing, abandoning brute attempts in favor of sensitivity. He let her initiate contact, then followed the line of force rather than opposing it. For a brief instant, he felt their movements synchronize, two practitioners speaking the same language with different dialects. He attempted a counter, redirecting her pull into a pivot. She adapted mid-motion, neutralized his leverage. Neither gained advantage. Time lost meaning. There was only movement, breath, and the quiet recognition that mastery was less about victory than about presence. In the corner of his vision, Bruce noticed the instructor watching closely, arms folded, expression unreadable. This was no longer a test of skill alone. It was a measure of character. The pace slowed, not from fatigue, but from mutual understanding. Each had glimpsed the other's foundation. Now came the subtler work, probing for intention, not openings. Bruce thought of his teacher's words. Absorb what is useful, discard what is not, add what is uniquely your own. He realized that what stood before him was not an obstacle, but an opportunity to refine that philosophy. She initiated the next exchange, her grip firm but not aggressive. He felt the direction of her pull and chose not to resist. Instead, he yielded slightly, redirecting his center. For a fleeting moment, her balance wavered. He did not capitalize. The choice surprised even him. Her eyes narrowed, not in suspicion but in recognition. He had chosen control over advantage. They separated. Around them, the observers shifted, sensing the change. This was no longer a contest seeking a decisive throw. It was a negotiation of values. How far to push, when to yield, what meant to honor the practice rather than dominate the opponent. Bruce's breathing steadied. He became acutely aware of the texture of the mat beneath his feet, the faint creak of the building above, the collective attention of the room. He moved again, not to overwhelm, but to invite. A feint, a step, a pause. She responded with a measured advance. Testing his reaction, their hands met. In that contact, Bruce felt something beyond technique, trust. Not trust that he would win or lose, but trust that he would not betray the spirit of the exchange. He realized then that the true danger in such a place was not defeat. It was losing oneself. A drop of sweat fell from Bruce's chin onto the tatami, darkening the straw for an instant before disappearing. Time had stretched. The outside world reduced to memory. There was only the mat, the woman before him, and the quiet weight of expectation pressing from all sides. He attempted a new approach, less linear, more fluid. Drawing from his striking background, he used rhythm to disrupt timing rather than force to break structure. A step in, a half step back, a shift of shoulders suggesting an attack that never came. She watched without chasing. When he finally committed to a grip, she allowed it, her sleeve sliding into his hand. He felt the tension in her arm, the coiled readiness in her hips. She was inviting him to act, to reveal his intention fully. He pivoted, guiding her momentum into a turn. For a brief, electric moment, her balance lifted. Then she grounded herself, her foot finding purchase with uncanny precision. The attempt dissolved into neutral space. They broke contact. Bruce exhaled slowly. He understood now why she remained undefeated. It wasn't strength. It wasn't speed. It was the absence of ego. She did not cling to attacks. She did not chase victory. She remained present, unburdened by the need to prove. He felt a flicker of humility. The instructor stepped closer to the edge of the mat, not intervening, but observing with heightened attention. Bruce sensed that the next moments would matter, not for the outcome, but for what they revealed about who he was becoming. He bowed his head slightly, an acknowledgement not of defeat, but of gratitude for the lesson unfolding in real time. When he looked up, she inclined her head in return. The conversation continued. The room had grown warmer, the air thick with the quiet concentration of dozens of witnesses. No one spoke. No one shifted unnecessarily. Even the building seemed to hold its breath. Bruce decided to test not her balance, but her patience. He circled slowly, offering no immediate engagement. His steps were light, deliberate, each placing his foot a question. Will you pursue or will you wait? She waited. He moved closer, then away, altering distance in subtle increments. Still she did not chase. Her composure was not passivity. It was discipline. Finally, he stepped in with sudden decisiveness, attempting to break the stalemate. Their grips connected, tension threading through their arms. He felt her center, stable, grounded, immovable. He changed direction mid-motion, attempting to draw her forward into a momentary imbalance. She followed without overcommitting, her weight always a fraction behind his expectation. It was like trying to grasp water. A flicker of frustration touched him, small, but real. He recognized it instantly and let it pass. Frustration was ego's foothold. He softened his grip. Her response was immediate. The tension dissolved. They stood connected, yet unopposed. In that suspended instant, Bruce understood something profound. Mastery was not control over another person. It was control over oneself in the presence of another. He released her sleeve and stepped back. The observers shifted, sensing the significance of what had just occurred. Though no throw had been attempted, no point scored. She bowed her head slightly, not a formal bow, but a gesture of acknowledgement. They had crossed an invisible threshold. The instructor raised his hand, signaling a brief pause. The fighters stepped back, breathing steady, eyes still locked in mutual awareness. This exchange, the instructor said quietly, is no longer about testing techniques. It is about testing intention. His gaze moved from Bruce to the woman and back again. You may continue, but understand that what you reveal now will remain with you longer than any victory. Bruce felt the weight of the words settle into his chest. He thought of the path ahead, unknown, unwritten. He thought of the temptation to prove himself, to leave an impression that would echo beyond this hidden room. He also thought of the purpose that had brought him here, to learn, to refine, to become more honest in movement and in spirit. They stepped forward once more. This time, she initiated with unusual decisiveness, her grip firm, her pull sharp. Bruce felt his balance shift, the edge of a throw forming. He could resist, force against force, risking escalation. Instead, he chose to yield fully, rolling with emotion, transforming the throw into a controlled fall. The mat met his back with a soft thud. A ripple of surprise moved through the room. He remained still for a heartbeat, then rose calmly, bowing to her. The choice was clear. He had surrendered advantage not from weakness, but from intention. Her expression changed for the first time, a subtle softening around the eyes, an acknowledgement deeper than words. In yielding, he had demonstrated strength of a different kind. And in that moment, the purpose of the match transformed. The energy in the room shifted from tension to contemplation. What had begun as a test of skill was becoming something rarer, a shared recognition of values. They resumed, but the quality of movement had changed. There was less probing, less guardedness. Each engagement was direct, honest, unadorned. Bruce initiated a grip and felt her respond with equal clarity. No feints, no deception, only the pure exchange of balance and timing. He attempted a sweep, not to catch her off guard, but to explore the boundary of her stability. She countered with a pivot that neutralizes effort. They separated without urgency. Minutes passed in this rhythm. Bruce sensed the observers were no longer waiting for a decisive moment. They were witnessing something quieter, two practitioners choosing integrity over dominance. He thought of the countless fights he had seen where victory bred arrogance and defeat bred resentment. Here, neither outcome held meaning. Only the manner of engagement mattered. She stepped in once more, her movement precise. He felt the beginning of another throw and responded with a counterbalance, not to reverse it, but to share the load of motion. They moved as one for a brief instant before breaking apart. Their eyes met. No challenge remained, only respect. The instructor stepped forward, raising his hand. The exchange came to a natural close, not with final throw, but with a shared understanding that nothing more needed to be proven. They bowed simultaneously. The room remained silent for a moment longer, as if honoring the gravity of what had transpired. Then the observers exhaled, conversations resuming in hushed tones. Bruce stepped off the mat, his body tired, but his mind unusually clear. He had not won. He had not lost. Yet he felt as though he had crossed an invisible threshold. The woman approached him near the edge of the tatami. Up close, he noticed the faint calluses on her hands, the subtle marks of years of disciplined practice. "You chose not to take advantage," she said quietly. "You chose not to exploit weakness," he replied. She considered this, then nodded. Strength without restraint is easy. Restraint requires trust. Bruce bowed his head. "Thank you for the lesson." She returned the gesture. We learned from each other. There was no ceremony, no declaration of outcome, only the quiet acknowledgement that the encounter had fulfilled its purpose. As Bruce retrieved his shoes, the instructor approached. "You came seeking improvement," he said. "You lead with responsibility. What you do with what you learn will define you." Bruce looked back at the mat one last time. He understood. Outside, the night air along the Sumida River felt sharper, the sounds of Tokyo more vivid. Neon lights reflected in the water, fractured by gentle ripples. The world had not changed, yet he perceived it differently. He walked without hurry, replaying the encounter in his mind, not the techniques, but the choices, the moments where he could have forced advantage, where ego might have taken root, where the desire to impress could have overshadowed the desire to understand. He realized how thin the line was between mastery and arrogance. At a small bridge, he paused, watching a barge drift beneath him. The city's hum continued, indifferent to private revelations. That anonymity felt comforting. Growth did not require witnesses. He thought of his future students. Faces not yet known, questions not yet asked. What would he teach them? Techniques, certainly. But more importantly, the discipline to choose restraint when dominance was possible. A memory surfaced. His teacher reminding him that the highest form of martial arts was not to defeat others, but to defeat one's own impulses. Bruce exhaled slowly. The encounter in the hidden dojo had not added to his reputation. It had added to his responsibility. Days passed, and Bruce returned to his routine, training, observing, refining. Yet something in his movement had changed. He no longer rushed to demonstrate effectiveness. He allowed space, listened more deeply to the rhythm of engagement. In a university gym, a young practitioner challenged him with youthful intensity. Bruce responded with patience, guiding rather than overwhelming. When the student stumbled, Bruce steadied him instead of exploiting the opening. "Why didn't you finish it?" the student asked, confused. "Because you were already learning," Bruce replied. Word of his composure spread quietly, not as legend, not as spectacle, but as reputation, the kind built on consistency of character rather than isolated feats. One evening, a letter arrived at his boarding room. No return address. Inside, a single line written in careful script. "Respect is remembered longer than victory." He folded the paper and placed it inside his training journal. He did not need a signature. Months later, as Bruce prepared to leave Tokyo, he visited the warehouse one final time. The lantern still flickered beside the stairwell. The door, as before, stood slightly ajar. Inside, training continued in the same measured rhythm. The instructor noticed him and inclined his head in greeting. "You have changed," the instructor said. "I have begun to," Bruce replied. The woman was there, guiding a pair of younger students through balanced drills. Her movements were precise, her corrections gentle but firm. She glanced up, meeting his eyes, and offered a small nod. No words were exchanged. None were necessary. Bruce watched for a while, observing how she cultivated discipline without humiliation, how she corrected without diminishing. He recognized in her teaching the same values he hoped to embody. When he turned to leave, the instructor spoke once more. "You came seeking to test yourself. You leave understanding that the true test is ongoing." Bruce bowed deeply. Outside, the morning light softened the city's edges. Tokyo was no longer just a place of training. It had become part of his foundation. On the ship back across the Pacific, Bruce spent long hours on deck, practicing forms against a backdrop of open water. The horizon stretched endlessly, a reminder that mastery was not a destination, but a direction. Passengers watched from a distance, curious but respectful. He moved with fluidity, each motion informed by lessons that could not be seen: restraint, presence, intention. At sunset, an elderly man approached. "You practice as if no one is watching," he observed. Bruce smiled. "That is when practice is most honest." The man nodded thoughtfully. "And when others are watching?" Bruce considered. "Then it is an opportunity to show them what honesty looks like." The ship's horn sounded, low and resonant. He felt ready, not because he had proven himself, but because he understood that proof was never the point. Years later, when stories grew around his name, some true, many embellished, Bruce rarely spoke of the underground dojo in Tokyo, not out of secrecy, but because its lesson could not be captured in spectacle. He taught students who came seeking strength, confidence, recognition. He gave them techniques, yes, but also something hard to quantify: the discipline to choose integrity over ego, respect over domination, growth over applause. Sometimes, after class, he would pause, watching his students bow to one another. In those quiet gestures, he saw the echo of that night, the moment when two practitioners chose to honor the spirit of their art rather than the temptation of victory. He understood then that the most important battles were rarely the ones the world witnessed. They were the ones fought within, in the silent space between impulse and action. The memory of the woman in the Tokyo dojo remained with him, not as an opponent, but as a mirror, a reminder that true mastery begins when the need to prove ends. And perhaps that is a lesson that endures beyond any legend, that strength is measured not by how forcefully we can act, but by how wisely we choose when not to. From which part of the country are you watching this story?